All right, everybody. It is a couple minutes past, so I think we've got our situation worked out, and we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome J.A. Atkins and Miss Crystal McPherson, and let me give a brief introduction. Okay. And then I will turn the floor over to them. All right. J.A. Atkins is a retired vice president for diversity and associate professor of education at Centre College. He's had a long career in teaching and education administration. He's been a middle school teacher, an elementary school principal, an assistant principal, and ended his career as a college professor and administrator. He's been a coach too, leading the Danville High School girls track team to state championships in the AA division in 81, 83, 84, and 85. Wow, that's amazing. And most importantly, Mr. Atkins is a husband and a father of 2 sons. He is joined by Ms. Crystal McPherson, who is a certified clinical social worker, currently a mental health counselor at Centre College. She has several years of experience working with families of various backgrounds, especially marginalized groups with cross sections of race, class, and gender. She worked as a homeschool community liaison for middle and high school and served as executive director of the Family Services Association of Boyle County for 15 years. Crystal is married to a high school assistant football coach and has 2 sons, one who is a self-employed executive, nice, and one who is currently a rising 8th grader. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and I will turn it over to you, and I will share my screen and your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Katie, and good morning.
Can you see that all right?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Katie, if you will go to the next slide, we will share our proposed agenda with the group this morning. And I want to share with everyone that since our last planning session, we've already changed our agenda. Can you all hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, on the agenda, these are the things that we will attempt to try to cover. Because we have an hour, we know we will not get to all of them, but we have prepared some handouts, some information for you to take with you after this section. And this is the start of conversation. This is a difficult topic to discuss. So we feel like we're just trying to open the door to give you the courage to start discussing these things. And you can call on us at any time if you get to a point where you need some further assistance. Okay? And in the first change, as you see the red highlighted sections, we have planned 3 breakout groups. One was to have you all take 3 or 4 minutes in a group to introduce yourselves, but there's 60 plus participants, so we're going to skip that first breakout group. We're not going to ignore the opportunity for you to share and get to know each other, but because of the time frame, we're just going to go right on past that. So Crystal's going to share with you all our goals, and we'll move through this agenda.
Okay, Katie, can you go to the next slide, please?
Oh, okay. Before the next slide, this is what we call food for thought. And this one is about diversity. And we're going to include some food for thought throughout the presentation. And our attempt is just that, you to read it and give it a little thought. We're not going to discuss it. Okay, now, Katie, if you'll go to the next slide.
All right, so our goals are what you was able to view in the synopsis for this training. What we want to do is to educate and re-educate ourselves on the complexities that surround racial and ethical concerns and issues in our society and especially our school communities. We want to take this time to try to better equip ourselves to deal with these concerns and issues in order to provide safe, welcoming, and involved educational community for all of our students. And we want to be able to start to identify equitable and practical solutions. Again, like Mr. Atkins says, we do have an hour, so remember these. One of the things that we hear often is that, we just wish we had more time, and that's that's the idea with this, is that we want to start conversations. We want to be able to give you some talking points to start having these conversations. Next slide, please.
Okay, and again, I prefer to do this type of work in person, but we're doing the best we can with this in-personal types of things. But we still want to have some space, some safe space. And so we have some guidelines. And we want you to agree to be honest with ourselves and to be honest with other participants when you do go into the breakouts. And we agree to participate without the fear of asking the wrong question, providing the wrong answer, or fear that this information from these sessions will be used against us or against you. That's not going to happen. This is a safe place, and I want you to feel free to discuss freely. And again, because this is a starter, that you'll find other folks to have these conversations with. So with that said, you give us a wave if you agree to the safe space guidelines. All right. All right, thank you. So we're going to skip that.
Okay, so the first activity, and all of these are going to be eventually talking points for you to have conversations in your breakout groups. The first activity that I like to bring to your attention is, how privileged are you? This is an activity that I learned from one of my colleagues, and I consider her a mentor, Candice Hargons. She's the founder of Healing Racial Trauma at UK. And this is an activity that really helps us to think about privileges in terms of not just race, which is what the biggest part of our discussion is today, but the fact that we all have privileges in different areas that bring us to our status in life, right? So what I want you to do is go through and take just a couple of minutes and see how many of these boxes you check, as these are considered privileged states. And as you're doing that, I want to read to you what Candice says about this activity. She says that privilege is relative, right? It's relative based on the culture that we live in. But ultimately, it's power. Privilege is power. So behind every privilege is the potential for you to have an imbalance of power. And that imbalance can be invisible to those who possess it and ever present for those who don't. Think about it in those terms, right? And if you can type the number of, and you're okay with sharing that, the number of privileges that you have that are on this list. This is not an exhaustive list. There's a total of 16. Okay, I see 12. Oh, I'm sorry. Cisgendered means that you identify as male or female, one of two genders.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so as those numbers are pouring in, I think usually about the lowest I've seen so far is about 6 or 7. So what Mr. Atkins and I decided to do is to ask this question. Like I said, we're not going to ask you to answer unless you feel like you want to in the chat box. But think about those privileges. Those privileges are some of the things that helped get you to the status that you are today. If you went back to early childhood and you were given a choice to keep 5 of those, which 5 of those privileges would you keep, knowing what you know today? Think about that. Think about which privileges do you need in order to be able to do the things that you want to do, or the things that you enjoy, or the career that you have.
And if time was to permit, we'd want you to tell us why you chose those 5 things. And that really gets us to a personal level of conversation. We're not going to do that this morning, but
just want you to think about it.
Yes.
Okay, and then the next slide, please. And this is another food for thought. The next slide, I do believe, is the video, Katie, if you can pull that up.
All right.
First challenge.
Oh, I think I have it.
Got it.
All right.
Now let me make sure I'm sharing sound. Okay.
I've got a challenge for you. Try talking about racism with your friends, family, or coworkers, and get ready to watch people squirm. So let's push through the discomfort. Don't worry, you can do it. We're going to talk about racism.
Well, the dictionary defines racism as the hatred or intolerance of another race or races.
Well,
Katie, is,
yes, but
Katie, is it playing
racism
on
is
your
a little
screen?
more complicated than that.
Yeah,
They can
Can
hear
you-
me. They can't see it.
can you hear it and see it, RK?
I think it'll be okay with the sound only.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not seeing it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I am seeing it on mine. This is what happened last time. Let me stop sharing and I'll reshare. Let's try it one more time.
She has just great expressions across her face all the time.
I love her. Okay, let's try this one now.
Okay.
Are you seeing the YouTube channel?
Yeah, there we
I
go.
do. Mhm.
Okay, I'll go back to the beginning and share sound. Okay. And just give me a thumbs up if it's working.
Racism with your friends, family, or coworkers, and get ready to watch people squirm. So let's push through the discomfort. Don't worry, you can do it. We're going to talk about racism.
Well, the dictionary defines racism as the hatred or intolerance of another race or races.
Well, yes, but racism's a little more complicated than that. The dictionary offers a very simple explanation because it's just the dictionary. If you want to understand racism, you need to talk sociology. And sociology explains racism as a combination of prejudice and power.
Well, isn't that just convenient? Let's just ignore what the dictionary says.
No, we're not ignoring the dictionary, just going a little deeper. Think of it this way. If your car breaks down, you don't look up car in the dictionary to try and fix it, you go to a mechanic. So when it comes to getting to the nitty-gritty of understanding how racism works, I say we should probably defer to sociologists, because they study how people, organizations, and institutions work. It's kind of their job. So here are 5 things everyone should understand about racism.
Ugh! Talking about racism is so exhausting. It's like no matter what I do or what I say, someone's gonna call me a racist.
Good people can unintentionally say and do racist things. Racism isn't just burning crosses and racial slurs. It's not always a conscious hatred or dislike. People automatically associate saying something racist with being a bad person. And while we can agree that being racist is bad, good people can say racist things or just wind up supporting racist institutions and practices without even realizing it. Oh, so now it's my fault if I accidentally do something. We're not playing the blame game here, but accidents can still be hurtful. It's important to remember that intent isn't the issue, it's the impact. Like if I accidentally step on your toe, it's an accident, but it still hurts. And I can't just pretend that I didn't step on your foot. I have to acknowledge it, say that I'm sorry, and be more careful with my big ass feet.
If you want to get technical, there's really no such thing as race. We are all the human race. It's a social construct.
Race is a social construct, but that doesn't mean racism isn't real. A social construct is a category, perception, or idea created and developed by society, and then it's applied to individuals or groups. So yes, we're all part of the human race, but the human race did this funny thing where they categorized everyone based on skin tone and regions. Even though social constructs are made up, they're still real. I mean, money is a social construct. Fundamentally, it's just a piece of paper, but it still keeps people up at night and has a huge effect on our day-to-day lives. Marriage, fashion, good and evil, they're all social constructs, but they're still real things. The same is true for race.
White, black, pink, purple, polka dots. I don't know why we need all of these labels. Let's just not see race. Just see everyone the same.
Colorblindness is not going to fix racism. It's a good idea in theory, but ignoring race is not going to solve racism. Race isn't the problem. Treating people differently based on race is the problem. It's okay to see my race. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore how someone looks. There's nothing wrong with seeing our differences. Our differences make us kind of cool.
Okay, but when are we gonna talk about reverse racism?
Reverse racism is not a thing.
I've been bullied, beaten up, and called all sorts of names in my lifetime, and you're gonna tell me that's not racism?
Whoa, that sounds awful. I'm sorry, none of that stuff is okay. But those are examples of racial prejudice, not racism. That's because racism isn't just about individuals, it's about institutional power. Racial prejudice is not cool, but when a person of color discriminates or stereotypes a white person because of their race, in the United States, they don't have the institutional power to back them up and say that those feelings are okay. Institutions are things like schools, government, the military, corporations, and our justice system. All of these things shape how people of color are treated as a group and as individuals. That's because racism is not just on a person-to-person basis. It's big picture things like people with traditionally Latino or Black sounding names having a harder time getting job interviews, even when they have the same qualifications as white people applying for the same job. Or people of color facing harsher prison sentences for petty crimes in comparison to white criminals. It's also harder for people of color to get home loans on top of housing discrimination that often keeps them out of predominantly white neighborhoods. This is how individual feelings about people of color are supported by institutional power. Prejudice of any kind isn't okay, but it's important to understand that prejudice and racism aren't the same thing.
Huh. I never thought about it like that.
Well, you are not the only one. Racism is complicated and overwhelming to think about, even for me. But understanding what racism is and what it isn't is the first step in fighting against it. So what are some misconceptions that you've heard about racism? Or maybe some misconceptions that you had in the past? Let us know in the comments and we'll see you next week. In our last vlog, I went to VidCon and asked fans about
She does a great job, and she goes real fast. You'll have a chance later on to come back to her, though.
Okay, I'm going to reshare your presentation now.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
So the next topic of discussion that we're going to discuss in one of our breakout groups is opposing views on defining racist. Now, I do know that there are different definitions out there for defining a racist. As a sociologist, I use the sociologist definition, but some people define racist as anyone that has racist beliefs and supports racist policies. And then again, like I said, the sociologists define racist as a person that has racist beliefs and has the institutional power to use those beliefs to oppress a group based on their race. And it's also notable that a racial minority can be racist towards their own race by both definitions. So keep that in mind. Again, that's going to be one of our discussion topics. And Katie, if you could go to the next slide, please. And then the next discussion topic is about why the goalpost keeps moving, right? So a lot of times we feel like we've got this thing under control, and then the definitions, different language comes out. People are using different hot button terms. I know right now the thing is critical race theory. But what we want you to do is recognize the reason why the goalpost keeps moving. And this is, like I said, one of the topics of discussions. I just want to highlight a sentence in there. Like a mutating virus, racism shapeshifts in coded language in order to stay alive. It doesn't disappear when people decide that they will no longer tolerate it. It just looks for ways to avoid detection. The most effective adaptation of racism over time is the idea that racism is conscious bias held by mean people. Remember from the video, it's not always about intent. Intent does not equal impact, okay? So that's gonna be is that our fourth? Yeah, that's our group 4 item of discussion. If you can go to the next slide, please. So now we're gonna have our first breakout room. There are gonna be 4 breakout rooms. As you can see, how privileged are you, which is that first test that we took. That's what's going to be in room 1. And then you also have content that I think Katie's already shared with you, so you don't have to try to remember these things from the slides. I know when you go in breakout rooms, a lot of times you can't see the presentation. So the 5 things to know about racism, opposing views on defining a racist, and goalposts moving. Those are all blurbs that are included in your packet. And it says breakout group content or something like that, I think is the heading on it.
And I guess we need to remind you all or tell you all that as you go into the 4 breakout rooms, Crystal and JH are going to be randomly placed in one of the 4 rooms as well. And where there is, as observers, maybe a little bit of participation, but not to evaluate. So Katie, if you will put us into 4 groups.
Okay.
Bill.
Breakout rooms, 4 of them, and you're going to be automatically assigned, and I'll open the rooms. Okay, we're creating your rooms. I like when this is happening to say, go to your rooms.
Katie, about 5 to 8 minutes.
5 to 8. Okay, I will keep a timer and then I'll just hit close in that time.
Okay.
Hello? Did we lose our feed?
I think that chat room was done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, stopped all of a sudden.
That's too bad. We were having a good discussion.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I mean, I think the bottom line is, you know, we're all in this together, but we need to understand, where are we going? Where is the end game? What will happen? How do we prevent another Holocaust? And, you know, it starts in the schools. There's no question. I really wonder this year, our kids, how much focus there's going to be on racism.
Well, JS, do you really think it's going to be any different than any other year? I mean, I know you made the comment about the critical race theory, but is it going to be any different? I mean, race is a part of American history, and you can't unweave that part. It's just a part of it. And the whole critical race theory, I mean, from a K through 12 point of view, like that term is mainly used for like a college course, you know, or college courses that go into more detail. But to not discuss it in K through 12 history classes and things like that seems like a mistake and a purposefully ignoring, you know, important aspects of our history.
I would add just quickly that I think there have been periods of time in American history that we have chosen not to discuss race. That has happened. That did not work. And that's coming from a place of privilege, right? If you are in the privileged group and you choose not to talk about race, you're silencing the voices of those who are being affected by being in the unprivileged group. So it's kind of, I always say it's easier for us to talk. That's the reason why I like to add the left-handedness versus right-handedness into that conversation. It's easier for us to have a conversation about something that has not been assigned by our culture or our system with value. You know, being left-handed or right-handed does not make, in our culture, does not make you smarter, or it doesn't make you live longer or any of those things, right? But it does make you different. And sometimes there are things that we have to accommodate people that are left-handed in our right-handed society, right? But it doesn't mean that left-handed people cannot be equal to right-handed people, right? But unfortunately, what's happened is with race and some of the other isms that have been mentioned in that privilege conversation is that our culture has assigned value to those things. So it's our culture assigning value to them and then embedding it in our systems. That's the problem. So to answer JS's question, the idea is to get to that left-handed, right-handed level. It's to not have value assigned to it. And you don't do that by just not talking about it. Because you have to know what value has been assigned to it that you need to change to begin with.
And, you know, it's not all just race either, you know.
Right, absolutely.
You start talking about equity, the big conversation in Kentucky, Dr. Chapman out of EKU does a really good job of breaking this out about, you know, the biases we have built in us that we don't even know we have. Yes. But more than that, the common denominator with our children is 85% of our kids were free and reduced lunch last year.
Yes.
You know, when you start thinking about the commonalities, can we move forward on the same footing? That's where I want to be. Yes, I want to be on the same footing with every black, white, red, yellow, does not matter the assignment. I hope that we're all on an equal footing to have an equal chance. The way America was founded, what I swore in for in the military was so all men all had a chance to have the same equity, the same freedom. And in my opinion, we have to talk about it, because when I have friends, you know, the best man at my wedding was black. He's a guy, we were roommates for 5 years. And me walking down the street of an unknown town and him walking down the street of an unknown town in Kentucky is two different things. It just is. Yes. You know, part of that is because of the grooming that, you know, he had from his family and from that long history that I think it was Jason maybe was talking about earlier. It's a different thing. Me and you walking down the street versus my friend Keith, that's 3 offices up, that's black and grew up in Russellville. He got pulled over 5 times when he moved to Owensboro because his parents bought him a Camaro. I drove a Camaro around town, got pulled over 0. The first question you always got asked, where'd you get that car?
Yep.
It can't be yours. You know, so those are the things that they're hidden, that they're still there. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just, like I said, in my opinion, that's where we still have a gap. You and I lived a very different life in the military, in that, yes, and that was one of the reasons Colin Powell joined the military, because it was one of those places where he could be equal and rise up to be, you know, our top general. It's not like that in society. I wish
All
it
right,
were.
JS, let me cut you off, because you know these are conversation starters, and you've done a great job. Katie, are you still with us?
Yes, ready to share?
Yes, ma'am. Let's go to 8. Let's go to the next screen. Yes, ma'am.
Be the maze of terms will be the next one.
Yeah. But I want to thank all of you all in all 4 rooms for your participation. Again, these are starters. Oh, right there you go. Remember the last slide we shared was about why does the goalpost seem to keep on moving? If you look at the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see that there's a connection to racialequitytools.org. And we got a lot of these terms from that site, but we also, these are just terms we hear people using each and every day. And I'm a social studies teacher of a trade, so I like to pop up a bunch of terms on the board and say, okay, class, there's 25 of us here today. So, but there's 82 of us here today. So we ought to be able to give some real good educational as well as common sense definitions to all of these terms. And I know individually, none of us probably can define all of them, but as a collective body, we have to learn to define these terms and use them so that our students, as well as our parents, have that same knowledge and that same understanding. If time was to permit, I would call on someone, like I could call on Javon Bell and say, Mr. Bell, play me a song and tell me what the word segregation means. Or play me a song and tell me what the word resegregation means. We're not going to do that today, but again, take a look at these terms. I'm sure there's some you all have heard, and if you know the meanings of, but if not, we've left you with some, again, discussion starters, but also a good source. So let's go to the next slide, please, ma'am. Okay, in doing this work, we're school people, so I always like to go and research the school district that I'm working with and find out what their real diversity data is. Chris and I both live in Danville, Kentucky, so we have 2 schools, the Danville Independent School District and the Boyle County Schools. And so this was some data we pulled out, some stuff we did last fall with them. But we wanted to see the racial, ethnic breakup of the school district compared to the state of Kentucky and compared to the United States. Now, if you're in a school district, you can do the exact same thing because all this stuff is public record. Go to the next slide, please. This was sort of exciting to me because it has identified the economically disadvantaged, but it also talks about kids who were degree of school readiness. Then the biggie for me was the homelessness population in the city of Danville and Boyle County, Kentucky. Again, wherever you're located, you can get the same kind of data and compare yourself to other places, but more importantly, use this data as an approach to reach all of the students in your schoolhouse. Somebody says all means all, and I appreciate that. JS may have said that. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Okay, and we're getting short on time, so I'm just going to skim through these. I do want to bring your attention to the equity detours in education. These are going to be in your packets that we provided as well, so that you can look at them and think about them in terms of your place of employment and maybe some changes that could or should be made. But I like to draw attention to the detours and then the actions or the principles to combat those detours. I know that one of the, when I'm saying detours, what I'm talking about is things that gives the illusion that we are being equitable in our institutions. And I'll say for my own experience, diversity does not always mean equitable, right? So like you could have a school that is very, very diverse, but systematically it's set up in a way that it favors a certain group of people. Namely, especially people that are able-bodied, for instance, or people that are not neurotypical. You know, the people are affected by the way that we choose to teach them in our settings. So again, it's not just about race, it's about privilege, period. Some of these things we have privileges and we have built our systems and our institutions based on the people who set them up and were privileged to do so. And the way that they set them up, they forgot about some of the people that were unprivileged. So again, back to the first detour is the pace for privilege. I always like to draw attention to it because it's the comfortable type of equity conversations that we like to have where we're talking about cultural competence, you know, and I'm not saying there's not a place for those things, but I'm saying that those are comfortable. When we use the word racism, everybody gets uncomfortable, including myself, right? It's a hard conversation to have, especially with strangers or people that we don't know. But without directly confronting it, it keeps running around in the background like roaches is what I always say, right? So the next one is poverty of culture. We cannot fix what we've refused to name. You have to offer access to higher pedagogies that are relatable curricula to all your students, right? Next slide, please. And then we have a deficit that is based in ideology. This is when we spend all of our equity efforts in fixing students, right? So we focus on fixing the student. The student is what's broken, not our system, not our programming, right? So it's blaming the student for their struggles. And I'm not saying that they may not have a part in that. I'm saying we have to examine ourselves and our systems and our policies. And then celebrating diversity is another detour that kind of masks itself as equity. When we include things like Black History Month, Cinco de Mayo, I'm not saying those are bad things, but it doesn't check the box of becoming anti-racist, being against racism. So the action there is to have professional develop opportunities that relate to equity. That if you hear the word diversity over and over again and nobody ever mentions racism when they're talking about diversity, then that's probably not a good training there.
Okay.
So next, please.
And Katie, let's oh, come on, Chris, you want to cover that?
Oh, just really briefly, there's trauma in curriculum. That's something that I like to bring to the table as a mental health professional, that, you know, a person's experiences are valid to them. They're living these experiences. So when we do things such as suggest that racism only happened in the past, you're discounting those students in the room who are currently experiencing racism, and you're saying that what they're experiencing is not happening. So in a way that we do that sometimes is by using, you know, readings and activities that focus on racism of the past and not speaking of it as it is now.
Okay. Let's skip that one. Skip the next two slides. One more. And one more. Oh, go back. One more. Go back. One more.
There you go.
Right, yeah, right. Well, time is short, so I want to be sure that we share with you some of the things that we think are the most powerful things that we offer. Crystal just did that, the detours. But going from a racist to becoming an anti-racist, this is one of my favorite learning tools. I tell educators to put it up in your classroom, put it in your lesson plan book, and whatever you use, whatever you read every day, let this become one of those items. And as you become more of an anti-racist, there's always, there's no doubt the chance you're going to lose some things. Okay? So read the fear zone, the learning zone, the growth zone. And as you think about where you are, I'm all over the chart. Depends on where I am and who I'm with and what the activity is. But as you move further to the right of this chart, you have to anticipate you're going to lose some things. And if you go to the next slide, I want to give you an example of some things that you might lose. Katie, you want to go to the next slide, please?
Sorry.
This is a food for thought. So just read this, but this goes back to the becoming an anti-racist. So here's what you got to be willing to do.
And if I just might add really quickly, anti-racist is not the same as not being racist, right? When you're anti-racist, it means you're actively doing things to end racism versus I just don't judge people on the basis of their skin color.
Yeah. Good point, Crystal. And see, these things are all excellent discussion items, right? But we're got to let you go at 11:15, so we're trying to go through some things very quickly. But feel free again. Katie has all of our contact information, and we'll be glad to share some of these items with you, and even discuss some of these items with you, or listen to you discuss the items would be a better way to say that. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, we're going to skip that. One. Go to the next one. Oops. Oh, go back one more.
Student speak.
Student speak, yes. Anytime we do training like this, it's important for us to call to your attention that as educators, as adults, as parents, we don't know what's going on really. So in order to improve our schools, we've got to take time to hear from our students. These are just 4 thought-provoking questions that we've used that middle school and high school kids have opened up and told Crystal their whole life story, more than what we needed to hear, but they're really good. And I'm sure you can think of others, but read through these right quick and get a feel for how they will open up folks for discussions. And I used to tell folks when I did this training that we know none of these things happen in your school. Well, I stopped telling that lie. They happen in all schools, my schools as well. But we got to take time to hear from the students.
Yes, I often say that, there's nothing worse than someone coming into a community and trying to change the community for the better from the outside, and they don't ask the community members what the problem is. So in our case, the community is the staff, the faculty, and the students. So if you want to see how well of a system you have developed with your school system, ask your students.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. One of my favorite ones says, today we stand on the shoulders of those who have sacrificed and paved the way for us. And as an educator, I stand on the shoulders of lots and lots and lots of successful educators. And in your classroom, you're standing on the shoulders of folks who went through those classrooms before you as well. But it's important for us to realize that we have a history, we have a past. I don't want us to cover up our history or cover up our past. So I think it's important that we bring it out. Okay. And then let's go to the next slide. We're not going to do this. This is a lesson that was developed by a couple of teachers and I. This was done school-wide with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and it's very interactive. But want to call it to your attention. Some of you all might know Laura Mason. She was an 8th grade social studies teacher at Boyle County Middle School. She's now one of their curriculum instructional curriculum instructional leaders in the district now, but real good activity. And so then to the next slide, our last food for thought, but notice it says Q&A. Katie, we have about 10 minutes to give them a chance to ask us some questions or make comments or whatever.
Would you like me to stop sharing?
No,
Yeah.
you can share that. I like for them to have a chance to read that because I always say
Right.
next time you see a tall black boy, but that could be changed. Short black boy, a tall white boy, females. Because it stresses the fact that we need to stress to all of our kids in positive ways about their abilities or talents to be the best they can be. It's always a good food for thought for us to end with, but we also want to have a chance for questions and answers. So you all wave or she'll unmute yourself.
Yeah, Katie, if you want to take down the presentation, I think it makes it to where we can see more people.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what'll happen. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Here we go.
Okay.
And I'll unpin you guys so that we can fit some more people on the screen.
Sounds good.
All right. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I teach in Clark County at the Phoenix Academy, which is an alternative school. And I came into teaching into my 40s, so I came in late in life. I've lived in Oakland, California, Indianapolis, so I've been around. And one of the things that blew my socks off when I started teaching was the fact that less than 2% of our teachers are African-American males. I taught freshman English in Montgomery County for a couple of years. And the crazy thing about being there was I was the only Black adult in the entire building. And we're talking 1,400 students, none of the administrators, secretaries, cooks, custodians. I was it.
Wow.
And I think when I see that previous slide, I'm a walking example of what we need to do.
Yeah.
We need to be talking to our kids of color about being more than what everybody in the neighborhood expects them to be. I was a pretty smart kid, and no one ever suggested to me to teach. It wasn't suggested to me until I was, like I said, in my 40s. So I think, we need to do a better job of when we talk to kids of color or even kids of disadvantaged population, what do you want to do? And even if they say something, I don't want, I'm not judging, but even if they say something as outlandish as I want to go to California and open up a weed dispensary, you have to say to them, okay, do you know what it takes to do that? Let's break it down step by step. Let's be realistic. And so for me, we've got to do a lot more of that. And we've got to do a lot more of promoting the teaching as a valuable profession for especially young men of color, because you look at just the athletes that we have in these schools, we could totally populate every high school, every elementary school, every middle school in this country with enough physical ed teachers to do it 3 or 4 times over. So we've got to do more of that.
Mr. Thompson, great comments.
Thank you.
I had an experience yesterday. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You can. So I've been thinking about this topic for years now, a couple of years, hardcore, and we've worked on some of these things. Our district does a great job. One of the things that I wanted to share is that we're trying to identify future teachers while they're still students in Jessamine County schools, especially kids that happen to be, diverse. And so we're tapping them on the shoulder, planting that seed, and then hosting events and keeping in contact with them through college. I think that's brilliant. That's awesome. So the problem I had was I never saw it. I have an assistant principal that happens to be African American, and I know that he has experienced that. I know Miss Carruthers. We've had a few conversations, so no, it's real, but I've never seen it. So I go in Dollar General because if you know me, I'm a Diet Coke freak and I'm out. So I got to get my stuff. So I go in Dollar General and I'm in the back where it is because they're 4 for $4. I mind you, that's a great day. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my 54-year-old life, I hear the little speaker click on and it says, just to let you guys know, we have a security system and we are recording, and any theft will be prosecuted. And I thought, I've never seen that before in my life. And so I turn the corner and I look, and there is a well-dressed young African-American man that had just walked in the store. And that hit me pretty hard. I've never seen it before. And it was good for me to see that and to experience it. No, I didn't experience it. To see someone experience it and have a little bit of empathy, because that kid had to know that because he walked in that door, that message was shared. And so it's not fixed. We got a long way to go, and it's happening every day. And so that helped me to be more passionate about it and more, I don't know, more focused on the reality that he and other people experience.
Thank you for sharing that. And what caught my attention, you say he was a well-dressed young man. What would have happened if he wasn't well-dressed?
My gosh, they would have tackled him. I mean, this guy was, I'm in there in camouflage shorts and a t-shirt that's got oil stains on it. Nobody looks twice at me, but this kid comes in wearing a tie, clearly has come from a job, just walked in the door, and within 10 seconds, that announcement happened. And I've never heard of that before in my life. So it blew me away.
Well, my advice to you is get your Diet Pepsi someplace else, but that's me. Someone else. Might be the only source in town, I understand, but someone else. Wait. That's a great
Lancaster.
Oh, well, okay. Well, but again, it's important that we take those experiences to our school, our educational settings, to use it as a teachable opportunity for our staff. Someone else. Question?
Can you talk about your experience in regards to this training in the schools and staff when you discuss microaggressions? Is that something that you talk about? Is that something you share? Because it's very real, especially in the example Eric just shared. That was a microaggression against this African-American person who was well-dressed, in fact. He experienced a microaggression. And those are things that we do and see all the time we don't really think about. So can you speak to that, JH or Crystal, if you don't mind?
I thought Chris was going to go first. That's all right. My thing is that we have to have the knowledge of the fact that that's what they are, that those things are taking place. And as adults, we're responsible for reacting. It's best to be proactive, to give out some real positive messages before these things happen. But when they do happen and they're reported, what we hear from kids all the time. I went to Mr. Atkins, he's my principal, that's me, and I told him 5 times, and the old dude didn't do anything at all about it. Well, that's the student's perception. As adults, we are addressing these things. I assume you're addressing these things in your school. But somehow we've got to find a way to let our students, the victims, and the aggressors, and the parents be aware of the fact that we are addressing these things.
Yeah, and I think what you want to do also is remember that aggressions do not have to be intentional. You do not have to intend to harm someone. And that's where microaggressions especially come into play, because a lot of times you may not even be aware that you're doing it. And unfortunately, a lot of times the person who's receiving the aggression, they've learned to kind of tone those things out. And they become unaware that you're doing it, right? And then that creates a system where we allow those things to happen. Just really quickly, I want to share my very first experience as a therapist was with a student that had been referred to me by one of the school systems that we've worked with in the past, because he kept having these outbursts in class, as well as that he was having these outbursts. And then it was brought to my attention that he was telling things in this class that happened, as Black History points. And because he was saying these things, and it was disruptive to the class. So he needed therapy. He needed therapy for that. That's what the thought was, that he needed to be fixed because he needed to stop saying those things in class. It wasn't that he was speaking disrespectfully, he wasn't cursing, he was not raising his hand, he was saying the wrong things in a history class, and he needed therapy for that. So that, and what even more so I feel guilty about is that I tried to give him therapy for that. I tried to teach him not to do that. And so me, even as a Black woman who has, privileges, I do have privileges, and I was in a place of privilege at that moment, and I did not use it to validate his experience.
Is it Beavers? S. Beavers?
Beavers.
Is it Beavers?
That's what it is.
I keep watching your reaction to some of the comments that are being said, and I thought maybe you wanted to add something to the discussion.
Well, no, I really don't. Actually, I'm starting a new medication. I'm not feeling very well. So, maybe some things like this happen out in society, where, you're thinking one thing about me and it's totally something else.
Yes.
That's absolutely true.
That's right.
So.
That's right. Okay.
I feel like the impact versus the intent could be its own separate direction, because I've had a lot of conversations with folks about these new voting laws that have been taking shape across the country. And one of the main rebuttals to that, is it only Black people affected? No, that's not the case. But who is a majority of the folks that are impacted? The intent may have said, okay, everybody that lives in this area code now has to drive an hour. But if 97% of the people that live in said area code are of a minority descent, so I feel like that could be its own separate lane and its own separate conversation, but it's very, very real.
Yeah.
In education as well.
Yeah. Well, and those of you on this Zoom, on this meeting this morning that are social studies trained professionals, we've strived to enlighten our students that the right to vote is an entitlement for all of our citizens. And here in 2021, we're trying to find reasons to why we should not let our citizenry ballot. Kind of contradictory to how I conducted my classes.
They are.
Okay. Someone else.
Fortunately.
Mr.
I think we're at our mark.
Yeah, we're at our time, and I would love to just keep talking about this, but I've got to start the next one. I'm so sorry. We need a lot more time to talk about this. We need to do a day long. Is that what you guys typically do? Is a day long training?
Oh.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
It is true. They put me on a new medication. And
I'm having trouble. I'm going to mute some folks. Okay. Is it typically about a day long training that you devote to this? I've got you muted.
About 3 hours.
3 hours? Okay, great. Well, I will be in touch, and ideally the next time we talk, we'll all be in the same room.
That's for sure. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. This was fantastic information, a good conversation, and like you said, just the start. So let's all keep in mind to keep it up. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy beautiful Danville. I always love driving past Center College when I would go to Western Kentucky. So I'm always jealous of your beautiful campus. So thank you guys all for your time. And we will see everyone at the next session at 11:30. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Thanks, Crystal. Thanks, JH.
Thank you, Dan.
Cool.